Arts Alliance, which is a regional arts services provider serving a 6-state region. And today we're going to have a workshop featuring Fayruz Benyousef, founder and principal of Fayruz Benyousef Consulting. Now, before I turn it over to our amazing speaker who's going to talk about Are You Making the Ask, I want to announce that we have 2 more upcoming workshops I'd like to make you aware of. The first one is on September 24th, and the workshop is called Accessibility on a Budget. And that's where Frank Salau, the accessibility coordinator, director, and teaching artist at the Rose Theater, and Christina Schutt, the director of the Mosaic Templars Cultural Center, will present on the accommodations they've made to their programming in order to increase access to their constituents. And that's sponsored by Mid-America. And Engage, which is also a program of Mid-America Arts Alliance. On October 8th, we will have a wellness workshop entitled Mindfulness and Self-Compassion Through Creativity. In this workshop, we'll fulfill need to really have the art community to blend mindfulness techniques and creativity from a connected and self-aware environment. There'll be more information and to RSVP for these workshops. Just check your inbox for an e-blast from us, and it will have all the links you need to register and find out more information about both of those events. Now for our speaker today, Fayruz is a seasoned certified fundraising professional. She has leveraged her 25 years of experience to implement transformational change and sustainable infrastructure in a variety of nonprofit organizations. She is well known for her extraordinary method of solutions-based problem solving and strategic thinking, which is why she's also encouraging all of you, if you have questions, she likes a participatory workshop. So while your camera may be off, please turn it on or use the raise your hand feature to offer feedback. If you have questions, please put it in the chat. You can direct it toward the Mid-America Alliance host, or you can just write it in general. Both myself and Karis, the liaison, will also be taking note of that. But this is not one of those presentations where you can or should just sit and listen. This is a chance for you to ask the questions and get more information as you consider what this fundraising landscape is looking like against the backdrop of social justice and a global pandemic. So in addition to what I've just shared with you, Fayruz is also a philanthropy advisor and an expert committed to the success of noble missions and the people who are leading them. And I am going to go out on a limb and suggest that all of you that are in this room today are affiliated or directly run organizations that endeavor to engage in noble missions. So without any further hesitation, Karis, unless I have forgotten something to announce, I'd like to turn over today's workshop to Fayruz Benyousef.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you,
welcome.
Chris, and thank you to all of you for stepping into this space today. I want to first just say, like I said, as people were logging in, this is intended to be for you and about you, while also being about your respective organizations that you serve and that you support in multiple fashions, be it that you are the chief fundraiser, the only executive, a board leader, you name it. And it would be interesting for me as we go along here and as we get this started, if you would let me know in the chat, what role do you play? It might be, as I said, everything in the organization, or it might be a very specific niche. So feel free to let me know that, because that will give me some good context that I can speak to as we gather here together. I also want to acknowledge, Kelly and I were joking about this at the beginning, that there's a lot of Zoom fatigue, video conference fatigue. I hope that each of you are very comfortable wherever it is that you are. I am standing barefoot right now in my home office here, and I have my very comfortable slippers that I have been living in most of my last 6 months or so, it seems like. So when Kelly joined in and we started talking, she said, "Oh, don't you look so nice?" I said, "Yes, but you don't know what the lower half of me looks like, right?" I think that's something that we probably all can very deeply relate to. I was in sweats earlier today, but I wanted to dress up a little bit for y'all and to be with you and engage with you today. Hey, Crystal, thank you for sharing all the way from Oklahoma. It looks like David. I love this. Please, please participate. Thank you so much. So we've got EDs. It looks like we have a lot of EDs. Manager of Individual and Corporate Giving, Rebecca. Another ED, Molly. Okay, so I'm seeing a trend and a theme here. Artistic directors, executive directors, board members. Looks like y'all are a mix of the only staff member. Wow. Okay, so this is why it helps me to have your engagement and your chat, and hopefully Karis and Kelly can keep an eye a little bit on some of the things that are bubbling up, but I also will try to do that as we gather here today. We are slated for 2 hours, so up to 3 o'clock. That is a long time, y'all. What I would like to do is for this to be, like I said, a little bit of a give and take. You'll notice that in the workshop here, there's going to be some video components and things and questions that I might pose. So I would like for us to allow for enough time to have some actual conversing, if there are people that would be willing to share and ask a question beyond what's in the chat. But I also am not averse to ending early, because it always helps us stand up, stretch, bio break, and do something for ourselves before we go on to the next video conference meeting, right? So with that, I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. Bear with me 1 second. Murphy's Law says the minute that you're about to share your screen, your presentation goes away. Here we go. Can you all see little nods or thumbs up or anything? Yes? Okay, let me put this in presentation mode. Thank you, Sharon. Awesome. So we're going to talk about, are you asking? And the reason for this to be titled that is I have noticed early on in this quarantine time and pandemic, and oh my God, what is happening to our world and to our communities, that as I started to visit with philanthropists here and not here, I'm in Central Texas, in Austin, Texas, and I would have questions about, are you as philanthropists, as board leaders, as volunteers, hearing from the nonprofits that you've supported? Are you hearing from them? And they go, well, yeah. And I'd say, well, how are you hearing from them? And they'd say, we get a lot of email. And I said, well, have the ones that you've supported the most, the ones that you've both been most connected to, volunteer for in a leadership capacity, have they reached out to you personally, like picked up the phone and called you, or done a Zoom or even a FaceTime just to say, how are you doing? And they say, no. And I say, what? But that's the reality. So as we were building this workshop, it became pretty obvious that we need to talk about asking. And I don't just mean asking for money, but asking, how are you? What's going on in your world? How's this affecting you and your business? Do you want to know about what's going on in our organization that you've been a stakeholder for? So with that, early on, our team developed a workbook that we felt compelled to give to our clients and to our network and friends, and offer to anyone really that wanted it and wanted to download it, for how to take a breath, sort of assess what's going on in the immediacy of all of this, and then when able, create a 30, 60, 90-day plan. And so here we are in September, and if you have yet to do that, or you have some semblance of it, or you did one and you're now thinking, well, now what do we do? That's the intention of today, is to have, as I call it, real talk that takes us to a place of letting our hair down and figuring out, how do we navigate these times? So I love this quote from Pema, which is about this thing that we hear so often called uncertainty. It seems like that's one of these buzzwords ever since entering into this time. And I'm going to read it to you. We can never know what will happen to us next. We can try to control the uncontrollable by looking for security and predictability, always hoping to be comfortable and safe. But the truth is, we can never avoid uncertainty. This not knowing is part of the adventure. I share this with you in part from a personal place for me, and that is last year, I went through 5 surgeries. A double mastectomy is one of those, reconstruction, and 6 months of chemotherapy for breast cancer. You want to talk about uncertainty? My whole world was uncertain. So I share that because I think that we can get caught up in this space of, oh my gosh, things are so uncertain. But if you really boil it down, when you woke up today, there might have been certain things that you were sure of. But in any given day, whether you're in a pandemic or not, most of life is pretty uncertain, right? You really, even if you know you go to a concert or to an event or to a certain meeting, the reality is we don't know exactly what's going to happen. And so I know that the pandemic is something of much greater scale. I get it. But I just want to say now, as a 2-time cancer survivor, first at age 16 and most recently this past year, and I'm grateful to be surviving, I'm okay with that uncertainty. And I think we as executive directors and as development directors and as board leaders really have an opportunity to be leaders, all of us, in how do we react to this scenario and this state of the world and our community and our organization that we're in. We can either freak out and not allow ourselves to breathe, or we can say, look, this is part of life. We just happen to be in a pretty unique, unexpected, certainly first of its kind that we know of, experience. So I want you to hold space for that today as we walk through this conversation, because I think with the pressures of what our budgets require, maybe our colleagues expect, our board leaders expect, we can get wrapped up in this frenzy, right? And I want to invite you to take a breath and walk this time with me and with the rest of the team that's on this video call today. All right. So what is today about? What is Fayruz going to talk about today? It really is about you, as I said at the beginning. And I want to talk a little bit about whether we have a mindset of abundance or one of scarcity. I tend to see things from an abundant perspective, and I'm going to show you why in a moment. I know that for a lot of people, there's a mindset of there's not enough to go around. We're all tapping into the same people. People won't give. And what we are seeing is that for major donors, especially, the statistics, and this came out in the Chronicle of Philanthropy, there's an article that you can Google and look up. Major donors, for the most part, have said they intend to give at the same level, and many even more than what they have been giving last year. Where there lies the uncertainty, if you will, or maybe not as much giving, is in the new donor category. So that's an interesting observation. And I think it speaks to this dialogue that we're going to have today about, are you asking and are you engaging? So I want to talk a little bit about arts and cultural fundraising and the impact that COVID has had on it, and what you're seeing and what I'm observing. And then I want to get right into the event conversation. Having them, not having them, going virtual, postponing, what do we do? When not just arts and culture organizations often rely on events to raise money, really across the board in the nonprofit sector, organizations do. And what I want to invite you to think about is, an event is just an event. What is it are we trying to do as executive directors, development professionals, program officers, artistic directors, board leaders? I think we're trying ultimately to connect people to our mission. We're trying to inspire people to understand the role that they can have in making the community, the lives of some group of people, the world a better place. So I want us to think, instead of the event, what about the experience? Is there room for us to shift thinking from events and all that goes into them, be they virtual or not, to I want donors, people not yet donors, so prospective donors, to have the experience that moves them in such a way, and that could be just a conversation, that could be a witnessing of our mission and action, that could be a virtual gathering where we've sent some nice boxes with dinner and with drinks and some nice something about our organization that's very thoughtful and meaningful and moves people with a musical experience, an artistic experience, a dialogue. So I want to start us thinking about that today. And then within that, of course, is the importance and the power of reaching out personally. What does that look like? How can we do it? What has worked? What doesn't work? And then lastly, I think a number of you, my understanding is that everybody who registered was invited and provided the fillable PDF fundraising workbook, is just to kind of walk through that. You might have filled it out, you might have downloaded it, but not. So I want to take some time to do that, and then we'll go into Q&A. Sound good? All right. So, oh my goodness, let me just be really frank. I'm not here to underestimate and be all flower and roses the impact of this time on arts and culture organizations. You've got, without a doubt, budget cuts, layoffs, furloughs, programs that are completely canceled. We thought, we kept moving a month out, 2 months out, maybe week by week, and then ultimately perhaps have canceled them. Closures. Our Paramount and State Theater here in Austin, Texas, the one thing that they've been able to do, which has been incredible, and I give Jim Ritz and Micah Jordan and the whole team there so much credit for this. Well, they can't have shows, they can't have performances. They've used their marquee for inspirational messages for the community. But those closures come at a cost. So this time is not something to be taken lightly, and I recognize that, and I want to be upfront about that, and I know that that's been the case for many, if not all of you. So this is a moment, whether you want to use the chat or whether you want to come off mute, I want to take just a minute or two to kind of acknowledge, what has it been like? I told you at the beginning, this is about you today. The intention is, I hope everyone can walk away with one little thing at least from today that either gives you a chance to breathe, a chance to be acknowledged, a chance to say, I have some ideas of what we can do differently that I think really will make a difference for me, for our team, for my stakeholders. So what has it been like? I would love to hear from you. What's it been like, and what has been your greatest challenge, or what is the current challenge that you sit with today? This is where y'all get to participate. Rebecca, are you my first one?
Yay, Rebecca.
It was like, as soon as I figure out where my unmute button ran to, I'm not shy coming from the world as a performer before this. I love jumping in and talking. Yeah, I'd say our biggest challenge, because we're a presenting arts organization, so we didn't have the same staff support challenges that a lot of organizations had, because when our donors stepped up, which they did incredibly, they supported like our staff operations for this current season, which is great. So we have actually canceled our entire subscription series for this entire season and recast into the next season. So I think our biggest challenge has been, one, undergoing that process of rescheduling with artist management closing and all kinds of issues there. And then being in that sort of status state of still not knowing what next fall is going to look like, if we'll be able to put on events at full capacity, you know, since we have these one night sort of extravaganzas with artists coming from across the globe to present with us. What does that look like if we have to suddenly go to a model where we're at 25 or 30% capacity? Like, how can we make that financially viable, and all the challenges that come with that? So just not knowing yet, which I know is everyone's issue too, but that's our greatest challenge right now, I think.
It is. It's that not even able to make plans in some way, right? Like it just
exactly.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing, Rebecca. Anyone else have kind of a, let me tell you, this is how it is? I'm looking around. I see very.
Don't be shy.
Yeah, please don't be shy.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm Christine, and I'm a rural art provider here in Stephenville, Texas. And it has been quite a challenge. I took over in February, and then everything closed down in March. And we were 2 weeks out from our biggest fundraiser, so that got canceled. And then we usually do our membership drive in June. That was canceled. So we literally have stuff going out, but nothing coming in. But I do want to give a shout out to Mid-America Arts Alliance, because we had the National Traveling Caldecott exhibit here, and we went ahead and took a risk and took it and did everything socially distanced. So that was a blessing in disguise. And we just kept ourselves out there all summer, trying to be out in the public and as much as we could.
Yeah, that's good. I think that's one of the ways people, to use another sort of catchword, pivoted, right? Is to like find other ways. What could those be? What could those look like to stay connected and to still be heard, seen? So I appreciate that, Christine. Thank you. One last burning, I gotta share. Anyone? Molly. Hi, Molly.
Hi. So the organization that I am the executive director of is an art service organization focused on the dance community in Houston. And so, you know, before the last 6 months, we didn't have like a really robust list of individual donors, because the folks who understand the value of what we do are the artists that we get to serve. And so fundraising is always a challenge for us, but now it's really challenging for us. And so, yeah, just trying to figure out how to do it when now it's even harder.
Yeah, I think that you're right. This situation has shined a light, it seems, on the maybe gap or the lack of a base, even more for a lot of organizations, right? So yeah. I feel you. Was there someone who had their hand up? Lauren?
Yeah, I would like to say that for me, one of the challenges has been between trying to find a balance between immediate needs and longer term planning, because as an executive director, you know, part of my job is to think about, you know, longer term planning for the organization. And I know that I personally feel like I've been in reactive mode since March. Yeah. Just this daily onslaught of, you know, crises, fires to put out, last minute decisions. How do I get us through the week? How do I get us through the month? How do I get us through the end of the year? I'm supposed to be in a strategic planning process right now. And I feel very challenged with how do I envision the next 3 to 5 years when the next 3 to 5 months feels so uncertain. And so not just as a personal challenge, but I'm also wondering in terms of my messaging and to donors or potential donors with fundraising, is the message just help us survive this moment? Or do I also, is it effective to tell them that we are thinking about next year and the year after and the year after that?
Yes, it is both. That's my answer to you. And I'd be happy to chat more with you, Lauren, about that. And maybe some of what today we talk about can dovetail into it. I think you cannot put your longer term intentions and goals and vision off just because, I hate to say this, the world feels like it's on fire. Because you know, there was an article I read that said some of the most cool innovations that we take for granted as a day-to-day now, like Favor and getting our food delivered right to our home. Do you know when those came about? 2008 recession, when there were people. I was in Denver at a meeting, and there was a mega community leader who he was apocalyptic about that time. He thought the world was coming to an end. I think maybe his portfolio was crashing. Like, there was a lot. But some of the most creative and amazing innovations came from that time. So it's not a time to stop planning. You obviously need to tend to the day-to-day and the crises. But I would say, you know, your job is to keep things afloat and is to help facilitate the long term. But it's really your board's job to think about the strategic vision and be with you in that space. But one of their fundamental sort of 3 or 4 roles is strategic planning. So, all right, I love this. I appreciate you all. We could just go on and talk about why does our hair feel on fire? But I want to hopefully bring some inspiration and additional perspective here to you. So thank you for all of you who've shared. I put this up before you because there tends to sometimes be this sense of there's not enough out there. Y'all, there's enough out there. Just look at this, the total wealth by country, and we sit with the, you know, largest piece of this, China coming in second. But the world's total wealth totaled about 360.6 trillion in 2019, and that was an increase over 18 of over 9 trillion. Now, the 15 wealthiest countries actually make up for, look at that number, 84.3% of all global wealth. And where do we sit? We're right at the top. Okay, bear with me. How many billionaires around the world are there? And where are most of them? Where we live in the United States. It's kind of crazy, right? Let's see here. Yes, you will be able to get a copy of the slides. Absolutely. My pleasure. And the sources for them are noted there, so you can dig in a little bit deeper. Now, this is a hot button for me, this next slide, because many of you or some of you might have been reading about, let's unlock more of these dollars that sit in DAFs, which are donor advised funds, and or in private foundations. Can you imagine that if individuals who had donor advised funds, foundations, private foundations, went from the bare minimum of 5% a year to say just, 7, double it to 10% a year? How much more of that combined 121.4 billion and 872.6 billion we could unleash to support nonprofits and all these noble missions that really could use that wealth and that money, right? So I think that we're in a moment, just like we're in a moment around racial and social justice and around health and equity, a moment for how is maybe philanthropy to some degree fueling inequity, and what could be done about that? And so there is a movement of millionaires and billionaires who are stepping up. Some of them, there's this thing, a hashtag, you could look it up. It's called Half My DAF, where they're saying, I'm going to give half of it away. I mean, if not in a time like now, here this money just sits there, accumulating and doing its own thing, which I'm not saying is a bad thing. But the whole point of putting it in these vehicles is to give it away, right? So you look at the number of articles that are out there right now through this time, especially around arts and culture and fundraising for arts and cultural organizations. When you just do a search that is arts during COVID, 3.5 or more million hits come up. We've seen these kind of headlines, right? The art sector is being decimated. What are funders doing? By the way, arts matter more than ever during this time. And you can all attest to this. You all have stories to share about how your missions heal soothe, comfort, right? In so many ways. But are we telling those stories? And if we are telling them, how are we telling them? According to Americans for the Arts, each year, our country's 100,000 nonprofit arts and culture organizations account for $166 billion, more than that actually, in total direct expenditures, so money going out into the economy, supporting 4.6 million jobs, and generate 27.5 billion in revenue for local, state, and federal governments. Just sit with that for a second. So there's a story to tell here about why the arts, on an emotional level, on a financial economic level. How do we tell that? How do we communicate that and ensure that our constituents amplify our voices around that? I want to talk about resilience through art. Can you all see this video? Okay. Let me start it at the beginning again.
Nothing seems to be moving, or maybe it's me.
It's not moving?
No,
No.
unfortunately, it's not.
It's just hands.
I think I was enjoying it for myself. Hang on. I was seeing heads nod, so it's like, oh, they're seeing it.
No, our heads were nodding, going, here it comes. We're excited.
Well, here it comes. Okay, hang on. Let's see. Now, do you see a video? Oops,
No, I see a white screen.
Hold on, y'all. Not soccer, something totally.
I mean,
different.
this is how the universe works. Things were going so well. People were participating. We were feeling encouraged. The slides were gorgeous. Of course, the video is going to completely show out.
Okay, here, let's try this again.
You've got this.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for the encouragement. I needed that. So, I think what happens, do you see this now?
Yes.
Yes. When I click on it, I think it goes to the site, but I have to probably pull up the site because you still don't see anything, right?
Right. That's probably what it is doing.
Okay, hang on.
Okay.
Now do you see?
Yes.
Yes. So that, yes.
Okay, here it is.
The sound is gone though.
I think they get the gist though. I think
they
we
do.
got it.
We just need to look at it, right?
Yes, we are. Isn't that awesome?
That's cool.
I love this UNESCO campaign. Hang on here. Looks like it went to the next video. Relaxing jazz music. I love the UNESCO campaign around Resili Art. That's what it's called. It's a Resili Art movement, and you can look this up, which is intended to have a series of like virtual debates globally about renowned artists and get support for cultural initiatives throughout the pandemic and the crisis. And some of you may have, in this time, turned to how can you use video to share what you're doing. So I would love to learn more about that. I'm wondering how many of you have seen this? Miss Mona Lisa being masked up. Has anyone seen this? You can tell me on the chat now. This too is, I think, something just that one, you have Mona Lisa, which is something we all recognize. It's something not unglobal, if you will, right? And Kelly's like, nope. But I think the power of that image, let me back up one here, is the fact that how does art, if you look at this, how can art step into a space of great despair, of great, as Kelly and I were talking earlier, debate, an equalizer in a way across the globe of how it's affected people. But now you see the Mona Lisa wearing a mask. It's an interesting opportunity to create conversation and dialogue about, wow, look at this iconic painting sort of now stepping into this time. So just something to contemplate. Which brings me to a lot of conversation about equity. Many of you in your organizations perhaps have programs and initiatives that provide and bring art, bring the inspiration of art and culture to communities that are underrepresented. And one thing that I think is really powerful about this image is that a picture can sort of tell a lot. And on the one side, you look at equality, and here's three people all trying to, for example, look at and watch a baseball game. But you notice if you give everybody the same level crate, the person in yellow still can't see. Why is that? Anyone?
Because they're not all on level ground.
They started with a disadvantage.
Thank you. Is that Riaz?
Yes.
Hi, welcome. They started with a disadvantage. That's right. So equity says we've got to understand people don't all start from the same place. Hence, why now in the equity image does the person in yellow get 3 crates and the person in red get 2 crates? So when you think about what you do in your respective organizations, I want to challenge you, I want to invite you to think about how are you telling the story of what it is you're doing that is acknowledging this very issue, that we are going beyond and ensuring that we pay attention to the fact that not everybody does start from the same place. And so our programs look like the following. It's just some food for thought in this conversation. And if you have questions or if you have thoughts, please go ahead and throw those into the chat. So I want to take us now to one of my favorite subjects, which is the fundraising event. I do want to have a conversation with you about what's happened in your circumstance at your respective organization during COVID with your fundraising events. As I said earlier, I'm sure some have been postponed, maybe have gone virtual, they've been canceled. What have you seen to work and not work? Feel free to pause here. I'm going to take us off share and I want to hear from you. What have you all done? Mary Lou.
I'll go first. Yes. We usually have 2 major events. I work for a museum and we typically have 2 major events, and one of them we ended up postponing from October until March, and then the other one we ended up just taking virtually.
Okay. And
that's what we did, is kind of a combination. We had one that went virtual and one we just postponed. So we did a little both.
And are these events pretty significant for your revenue stream?
Yes, both of them are, yes.
Yeah. And you've already done the virtual one or not yet?
We haven't yet. No, we're coming up on it. So that'll be at the end of October. And then the one that we just postponed was the bigger of the 2, the one that was more important. So that's the one we ended up just postponing.
Yeah, there's a lot of hybrids. I hear you. Some still being pushed out into 21, but others carrying on just in a different format. Yep. Anyone else? Rebecca?
I'll share again. Talker. So our, again, as a presenting arts organization, we normally do a gala that used to be tied to like an auction fundraiser type thing, that we no longer do that component. So it's just like, here's an opportunity to meet this world famous artist. And since we ended up canceling our season, we definitely canceled that event because we had no artist that we could employ virtually in time to make that happen, like with contract negotiations and that sort of thing. So for this year, we've canceled our one major fundraising event, but we did replace it with a couple of smaller ones. So we've had a lot of donors who, as you said, have given over their typical pledge for the year. Lots of folks who were planning on sponsoring concerts this year that decided to just donate the money anyway. But it was also a significant milestone year for our executive director. So we planned a smaller version of a fundraiser in honor of him. So instead of this big meet and greet with an artist, it was, you know, support every year that our Edie has been with the series, and then past that, donate for how long you'd like to see him here. So that was pretty effective, but we are missing some of those major gifts that we would get at that event, and ticket revenue, that sort of thing. So
yeah, definitely.
Fayruz, there are two folks. One person, Lynn Engelman, said there are no fundraising events, and then Trilla Ray Carter said the October fundraising event was postponed. We are preparing for a year-end appeal and exploring a virtual fundraiser. And I'm sure you'll talk about that virtual fundraiser, but I just wanted to make sure I brought that to your attention.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you all for sharing in the chat too. I think it's been what we're seeing has been a mix of people trying a variety of things, and some with great success, some kind of not as much. It's interesting. What I'm hearing is, man, I thought the virtual event would be a breeze to put on. There's a lot of work that we never even imagined. All the technical issues. I mean, we're not doing an event, but this is like an event. And you saw my challenges on the video. So if you want that smooth production, there are now companies and consultants that are, you know, have that tech savvy and that expertise, and that's what they're doing, is helping organizations be able to step up and put on these virtual events. It's just an interesting time. Conundrum, right? A little bit of a conundrum. Well, here is a video that I believe will play just from the next slide, and it really is a conundrum.
Good to see you. Check out the option on the left. You'll see the table and everything in there. Look at these from 14 carats. How beautiful. I'm wondering if my husband will bid on these for me. I have a feeling he won't, because I spent too much money at this party. The party cost me 6 figures, and my original goal is to make $200,000 for the hospital. And if I don't make money, then I should have just given this money to them instead of the party.
Yeah. What does that bring up? What does that bring up for y'all? Did you all hear what she said? Her intention?
I don't want to say it in mixed company. I know what it brings up, but I'm a professional and I'm at work, and so I'm not going to say it.
Thank you, Kelly.
And I can tell you what it rhymes with, but I might as well say it, so I won't.
How do you really feel? I can't tell.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
I mean, here she wanted to throw this fine, lavish, amazing party. She spent 6 figures on it. Her goal was to raise 200. That's enough. You see the disparity here? Yeah. Amy says, I remind my board of this all the time. It costs so much to put on the event. They should just give us the money. Here is the Fayruz. Let me get on my soapbox. Just hang in here with me for a second. So when we think about fundraising, most of the time our boards and people generally do go right to put on an event. That's how you raise money. But I want you to ask yourself a couple questions as you think about this. And I've gone to them, I've sponsored them. I'm not, saying they're not worth doing, but I want to just ask a couple questions about how we do them and why do we do them. And is there an alternative or some way to refine the manner by which we do them and still raise money and maybe even raise more money and not drive our staff members to be bleary-eyed and leave? So who can attend the event when we put on these events? Who can attend? Usually there's a ticket price or sponsorship. Who's actually planning the event? Who's putting it on? Think of the people that are actually doing that. Aside from the desired outcome of raising the money for a worthy cause and mission, why would an event be the way to do that? Pause and think for a moment. Why do we do it that way? And at the end of the day, who's the event really for? When did nonprofit executives and development professionals, advancement staff in higher ed, turn into entertainment professionals? Like if you're an ED, is your skill set party planning? If you're a development professional who's about getting to know donors and engaging with them and helping to bring them their values to connect with the values of whatever the organization's values are, is your resume like, I know how to help people have a really good time? If you think of it, the fundraising event usually has a ticket price, as I said, a sponsorship cost, a really nice dinner or a lunch, entertainment, music, dancing, an auction of some fancy things you saw in the Real Housewives video there, the earrings that she was hoping her husband would get for her. It could be live, it could be silent. And then a lot of times too, there's a recipient of services from the organization, someone who's had some benefit, that is asked or invited to tell their story, give a testimonial, might be also on video. And there's a lot of expenses and a lot of staff time and volunteer time. So I've been wondering this for myself for a little while. Why did we move away in this nonprofit space from engaging people more directly to learn about our mission, our programs, witness the impact, to educate, to heal, to inspire, and invite them to give in that one-on-one manner? Isn't that, after all, what we know to be the best way to build the deep relationships and the trust that it takes to have deep, connected, sustainable relationships? So I want to invite you to just think about that when it comes to events. And why do we do them? What does it take out of us to do them? It's a lot. And I'm wondering, as I said earlier in the agenda review, is there an opportunity instead to create experiences that really build that connection of getting to know us, understanding what we're about, finding the connectedness of the mission and the goals? So here are some things to ask ourselves. Even in this time, why do the event? How much effort is it actually going to take? What kinds of resources? As I said, virtual events are not something to be like, easy breezy. I've been on these on the volunteer side and on the professional side in this time, and it's a lot of work. How well are you able to connect with your guests at an event? If you have an event, whether it's for 30 people, 100 people, 500 people, how well can you, the team you have, whatever that looks like, really connect deeply with them? And how often ask yourself, how often are you connecting with them beyond the event, after it happens? Or are you racing to put on the next event? So they might have put their paddle up and spent a whole lot of money, either in the fund the mission moment or on auction items, but how often are you able to connect with them to more deeply than say, thank you so much. In total, you ended up supporting us to the tune of $28,000 at our gala. I want to share with you what impact that's going to have and invite you to come and see or share with you this virtually. And how often do these events create what I would say sustainability for you? Long-term organizational sustainability through the deepening of relationships that you are creating. If you can answer that, hey, these events, I got the answer for all of this. We're not losing money. We're not burning anybody out. It works for us, then okay, right? But I just want to pause and say, is it? And I know I might be very unpopular right now in saying this, but I think it's something worth exploring, worth talking about in our organizations, with our boards, with our committees, about, is the event the only way? I'm going to tell you just about a little quick something that happened here in my community. As I shared with you, going through breast cancer, I have become involved in some volunteer initiatives around that recently. We are working to help the uninsured and underinsured women in this 6-county region who do not have the access to go get a diagnostic mammogram and who are presenting right now at stage 3 and stage 4 breast cancer because of that. A mobile mammography unit through this big pink bus. The team that's involved is a great network team of people with amazing relationships. And through the one-on-one engagement and outreach and conversations pre-COVID and during COVID, we were able to close in on a $2.5 million number to the tune of everything but about $250,000 of that. And still working. Some grant funds, individuals, companies, it's been phenomenal. One person in the group said, well, we need to do an event because, you know, that's what you do when you raise money. We need to do an event. Every weekly conference call was completely consumed with the discussions about the logistics of the event. And who are we going to get that's a celebrity and entertainment and all of this. Hours upon hours, not just together on Zoom, but offline, which could have been spent in continued dialogue of one-on-one conversations that were yielding 5, 10, 25, 50, 100, 300,000. We did the event. It raised 20-ish or so $1,000, but it wore everyone out. So pause for just a second and tell me thoughts, reflections on the event dynamic and doing them and how it works. What do you all think? Yes, Lynn.
I think it depends on your organization and what your structure is. I'm with a historical society, so we don't have the problems that the arts is having. And we started at a disadvantage, and we started a capital campaign in 2019, which was not going well. And we had people go out to these companies, but because we had closed the museum for other renovations, and there's all the politics, and history is now this thing that everybody has their own version of history.
Right.
You know, sometimes it's the wrong people going out there, and we have no sustained ownership. So we are, you know, hand to foot, and the board puts on all our one event, which is, you know, basically we get a little profit off tickets for the dinner and
Yeah.
things like that. But I think it depends on what your issue is, you know, dance and theater. I think people are a lot more cognizant of that, but the small museums that are buried in, you know, a county level museum, people are like, who are you and why should we care kind of thing.
Yeah.
So the events, if the board does all the work, which I end up doing, and maybe everybody does the donation for the auctions, you can make a little bit, you know, we made a couple $1,000, but for us, that's, you know, it's better than nothing. So.
Yeah, I hear you.
But asking for donors for money, unless you have something that you can really show them and something that's relatively imminent, doesn't work either typically, especially if everybody's, you know, tightening the belts, even before COVID.
Yeah. Yeah. You have to know your, not just what it is that you're doing, but your, like we were saying earlier, your donor base and how do they react? How do they participate? What is compelling to them? Hi, Carrie. I see you on video.
I did turn on my video. I am a small visual arts organization. And, you know, when I have been the executive director for 2 years, so when I took over, we had one major fundraising event that happens in November, right before Thanksgiving. And we're have a strong history in our community. So people have memories of this event being the biggest event in town. But it was kind of still chugging along, to my opinion. And what I think happens in our organization, and I don't actually know how this works in other people's organizations, is that we end up putting a lot of staff time into it that I would like us not to put as much into, but we do. And then when you look at like, oh, we made this much money, we made this much money, I'm like, but we actually didn't if you calculate my staff time. But nobody wants to do that. They don't want me to put that in there. So,
As Greg,
we actually had the meeting of whether to do it virtually or not, and luckily my chair was like, let's just ask people to give the money that they would normally give. Please, thank you.
Yeah. No, you're right. Greg, I think, wrote in the chat soft costs, and soft costs sound like, oh, well, it's just the soft costs, but it might be a good exercise to put down on paper not only the hourly rate that each staff member, you know, is putting forward, if you think about it, if you calculate all the hours, but then even the volunteers, there's a national rate, and then there's one state by state of like, it's 26 some cents on a national average dollar per hour for volunteer time. I worked with a group one time where they were so into this event that they did it year after year. And when we started to break down, okay, what's your ROI on this? Like from actual hard costs, right? What you pay for food and entertainment and all of this, let alone the staff and volunteer time. It was like out of 100 grand, they maybe pocketed 15. And I'm like, something's really wrong here. The best practice is no more than 30% at most. So anyone else? Check the chat here. I think there's some comments. Yeah, it does add up, Carrie, you're right. And Chris saying, very few do understand the difference between net and gross revenue. And that's my advice to y'all is maybe use that in your new board member orientation. So as you groom new board members, they start to really understand that, and they can become advocates for, again, I'm not saying don't do the event, but really be thoughtful and strategic about it on a hard line numbers perspective, as well as an equity perspective. And why are we doing 16 of these? I worked for an organization, an arts organization at one time. When we added up the number of events that we as a development team were responsible for, we had 82 events in a year. There's 52 weeks in a year. Something's drastically crazy about that. So I just want you to think about it, reflect on this, have the conversation, because I think it's one worth having. And as I said earlier, I want you to think about how you could maybe create the experience for your stakeholders and donors. Think about this. What if you could do that so that they could better understand your mission? I can't tell you the number of times people have told me, I went to that great party. It was a masquerade party. And I was like, oh, well, what was it for? I don't even know. They didn't even remember what cause it was for. They just knew they had a great old time. What if it would provide a way for the stakeholders and donors to understand the challenges that you as an organization are trying to make better and solve for, and how can they see themselves as being a key to that solution? And really connecting the values and even knowing what the values of your donors are. Because if I come to your event and I just put up my paddle and I'm a guest of someone, you don't really know what it was that moved me necessarily. Is it that I wanted the trip to Belize? Is that why? Or is it because I was moved by something in the mission? And what if through an experience, and we're going to talk here in a second about what's Fayruz talking about, you could build these sustainable and trusted relationships. I'm telling you, I know you can. So, what does this experience that we're talking about look like? Some of you probably do it and don't even realize. So I wanted to pause for a second again and say, let's try to fill in the blanks together on this, right? What could an experience be like where you could share your mission and action, even during COVID, connect with people on a more deeper level and get to know them, understand what makes them tick, understand why they care about you as an organization or the kind of art, culture, whatever institution it is that you are about? What could that look like? This is where I go quiet and you can say, thoughts? Is anyone doing anything to connect with people in a more one-on-one kind of manner? I think you are.
There are over 50 people on this call. I'm sure someone has something wonderful to share. We don't get a chance to brag and celebrate the good things that we do often. I support your efforts to do that today.
Haley, thank you. Houston Boy Choir, open rehearsals on weekends to existing donors. Okay, do you mind telling us, you don't have to go on camera if you don't want to, but what does that look like for you? And how are you able to engage and provide that experience where you get to know your stakeholders a bit more?
So we're an educational organization, and we allow, we really just, it's more of a invitational offer, and we don't have everyone take us up on this, which is one of our challenges, is really drawing them in, because it is only on weekends. Our weekly rehearsals, it's harder to get people in through the door because those happen more during the workday. But even on weekends, it's hard to get people into those weekend rehearsals, and we only have those once a month. But really, whenever they do come, we have, usually it's myself, I'm the main development person-ish,
Yeah.
and another staff member kind of walk around and then show them around the different groups and kind of explain what we do, what we're preparing for, and kind of give them a little bit of an insight into our season.
That's great. And what's the feedback been like?
Usually it's very positive. We sometimes see an increase in what they give, and sometimes it's just more that relationship building with those people, and they usually do come back for another season.
That's awesome. You probably are getting to know them a bit more. I mean, I'm sure people ask questions, share things about themselves or what really inspired and moved them.
Mm-hmm.
And so good to note that in your database.
Yes.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Thanks.
Rebecca said that, do you want to speak, Rebecca? This is awesome. Calling donors personally.
So part of my position is me and my supervisor share most of the development responsibilities. And so she interacts largely with higher level donors. She's out on maternity leave right now, so our ED is doing more of that right now. But I am in direct contact with our corporate donors and also folks in sort of the $50 to $1,000 giving range, and then also what we're calling like sort of cultivation status donors who are giving below $50, but we want to like work on tying them into the series so that we can grow them into higher level donors later. And so something that we've been doing over the course of the summer is we're personally calling every one of our donors and asking how they're doing, updating their information in our system, asking them if they have any questions about the recasting of our season into next year and what they're excited about, and just having more time for cultivation while we have time to cultivate. And part of how we're doing that is sending a donor newsletter, again, to sort of those higher level donors of this is, you know, the state of the arts in general. Here's what's going on with the series, things we're excited about. We're actually giving a virtual concert next month where we're flying in an artist, but they are doing a live broadcast on the internet and with a local radio station. And they're going to Zoom into local schools and have conversations about her art and all of that stuff. She's a phenomenal cellist of color, and she's a wonderful human. So we're excited about that.
That's fantastic. I want to reference some of these really, I think, good feedback points in the chat. Like Trilla Ray Carter saying the fundraiser versus friendraiser as a young nonprofit, we want to increase our connection to our audience. Yes. I mean, this is all about connection, and we're going to dive into that next here in a moment. And then Cynthia, I hear you. I've heard this from people too, who are like, please don't make me fill a table, whether it's virtual or in real life, of, you know, 8 other people and have to get dressed up and go. I will just give you the money because I believe in what you do, but I don't want to go to more events, right? So that's important to like survey your people and find out. Now, there are people right now who are like, just please, if I could put my tux on and go somewhere, or my fancy ball gown. I'm itching and eager to go have human connection. And I get that. Like, we all hunger for that. And Trilla said, again, can we afford these kinds of events? Trilla, were you referring to events that are like the old school events, or the experiences that I was talking about?
The old school events. Can you hear me? Because I'm on 2 different, I'm a visual and my phone because my sound is out.
I hear you.
Yeah, the cost of doing a full-blown fundraising event and the cost of it. And there's definitely the advantage of the friend-raising aspect, especially as a young organization, but the cost is, I mean, we've done some very inexpensive, I'm running a period Baroque ensemble here in Kansas City. So we did Baroque and barbecue. So it was very inexpensive to do. My brother is a specialist in doing the barbecue. So it was done very inexpensively, but it was still, you know, what we brought in, the friendship aspect of it was a huge plus, but what we raised was, you know, minimum.
Yeah.
So,
and I think that's the question to really be asking ourselves, and to, you know, put pen to paper from past experience when you are pushed to say, you need to do an event. That's how we're going to raise the money. To be like, well, do we? Because here's what it looked like before. And if you factor just hard costs, it's this, but now when we layer on quote soft costs, it's this, right? So, and then Emily saying, being worried about the pitfalls of online engagement. That's an interesting point. I wonder if you'll expand a little bit about that, because I think I know where you're going, but if Emily, you wouldn't mind sharing. I don't know where Emily is. If she's not there, that's okay. All right.
I'm here.
Hi.
Sorry, I'm just juggling phones and masks and a whole bunch of stuff.
Bless you.
So I've been on so many virtual events and meetings and all this kind of stuff, and some of them have been plagued by problems with the platform.
Yes.
You know, there's a lot of conversations that we have that are really important, and they're really tough and good because they're tough, and tough because they're tough. And that's okay. We need to do that. But what I'm worried about is the actual platform itself. Because sometimes, because we're all new to doing this all day, every day, people aren't understanding that it's the platform that's creating a problem. Yes. A misheard word, a misunderstood statement, no time to explain yourself. If the breakout room bounces you back into the main group, no way of, you know, it's sort of very intimate, but at the same time, it's not intimate. So it can leave some people in kind of very vulnerable, painful positions. And so I know this doesn't really apply necessarily to events, but if we're doing this kind of outreach that you're talking about and sharing of experiences, which I think is really a great idea, I do worry about how the online platform could get in the way in a negative way. Not to be pessimistic, but just thinking about it.
You are spot on, and I'm grateful as you are juggling for you coming off mute and sharing that. And I think it's just something to be acknowledging of, or to acknowledge, because, you know, you never know what bandwidth and Wi-Fi connectivity and all of these issues could be. So the thought for me is, how can we provide an experience when it just even is over the telephone, a conversation? Right, starting there. And I think, Carrie, you shared how many long calls you've had with donors and stakeholders that you've had, you know, now in this time more than anything you've had before. And I bet you've gotten to know them more deeply. They've probably shared all kinds of concerns, fears that have nothing to do with the organization, but just getting to know them as people. I want us in this next phase of the conversation to do something. If you have been sitting, stand. If you have been standing, which I've been standing, stretch. Put your hands on your hips. Take a breath. Because we've been at this now for an hour and change, and we've got a little bit longer to go. I'm going to share my screen again, and I want to take us into a dialogue about what is personal outreach. I want to take us back from having a dialogue that's about our organizations and our fundraising and all of that. And I want to make it back to be a bit, again, about you, each of you on this call. Answer this question for me, and you can put it in chat. What inspires you personally to be connected to a cause where you can't imagine not being somehow engaged? What is it that would have to happen for you that would be like, I can't imagine my life without them? What would you need to see? You could be a donor, you could be a patron, buy a ticket, you could be just an enthusiast. From a personal perspective, think about the things that you are deeply passionate about, you, each one of you. What moves you to be like, I am in? I don't care if it's going to be on some wiggity video platform. I'm going to try to figure it out. I'm going to call Carrie. I'm going to call Rebecca, whatever. What is it that moves you to be connected? I don't see anyone sharing. It could be one word, it could be two words, it could be somebody cares about me. It could be someone checks in. I love what they do so much because I had a personal experience with it when I was younger. Anything. Carrie says if she gets a handwritten note, she remembers it forever. Passion about the issue that the group is supporting from Lynn. Lisa, a combination of my connection itself and my relationships with the people who are involved. Beautiful. And Lynn, on your basic question, let's try to come back to that. So if Karis and Kelly can help bring that back in the Q&A, that'd be great.
Will do.
Thank you. Mission driven from Lauren, but you feel even more connected if there's an especially compelling staff person. I'm starting to see a little theme here. Anyone else? What moves you to want to give, want to be connected, want to buy that ticket? What is it? You are all passionate people who care. Otherwise, you wouldn't be doing what you do in your organizations. I know this. So as you keep thinking, reflecting, and sharing, I want to ask you this question. We've talked about this a little bit already. How many times, how often during these last 6 months have you reached out to check in on your donors, your partners, your stakeholders, but you haven't brought up asking for money? Next, on sharing. Have you actually taken time during the pandemic to share what you're doing that is all about we're keeping our mission alive in this way, we're pivoting, we're altering, we've had to make these changes, we've had to stop our performances, we've had to make budget cuts and staff cuts. This is how it's affecting what we're doing. So in other words, have you been able to give an update on how the donor's investment in your cause is being affected? Remember, they've invested in you 1 year, 3 years, 10 years. Have you been able to give them an update on how their investment is being affected? And no, I am not talking about through email and mass communications, but I mean like personally, like, hi, Kelly, it's Fayruz. I want to check in on you and I want to give you an update. Kelly, I'll call you later to give you an update. And lastly, after you've checked in, after you've thanked them, after you've shared, are you saying, so Kelly, this is the place that we're in. I really want to invite you to talk with me about how you can be part of the solution. Let me spend just a little bit of time on the language of asking and what that looks like. Here are some phrases to get familiar with. Again, we will be sharing the slide deck with you. Would you join me in making a gift to support what we are doing at the theater? Would you consider making a pledge that can support our work at the ballet, at the dance company in this critical time? What do you need to see or know to make your best gift to support what we are doing for arts preservation? Kelly, you're important to us and to our mission. Will you consider joining me and the other donors who've made a gift already with a philanthropic investment this year? A few comments on why we do what we're doing here. I think it's important to spend a moment or two on this and just recall this through the work that you do. We practice this love of humankind and love of one another to help, to heal, to transform, inspire, and ultimately to be able to bring about a sense of love and a connectedness. That's why we do it. We're not doing it because we're selling something, even though we might have tickets and we're selling those tickets and that's part of our diverse revenue stream. But in terms of philanthropy, we're doing this for some very heartfelt reasons. And the power of, when you look at the economic impact of arts in the United States and really around the world, it's pretty significant. And it has been affected greatly this year. But yet it is, many people will tell you, my 15-year-old daughter included, that through music, one form of art, it's been a way that people are able to navigate this time and to deal with, I can't even think about it anymore. I can't watch the news. I can't listen to what's going on. So back to the very beginning in our conversation about art being part of how we can be resilient. You all have a story to tell in this realm of how are you helping? How are you healing? How are you inspiring? And how are you loving? So I want to dive a little bit now into the more pragmatic aspect of why we're gathered here today, which is this playbook, this guide. And I want to preface it with a couple of things, 5 points that really were the basis for making this guide. And then we'll open up the time for Q&A. One is, it was important for us to say to everyone, it's the deer caught in the headlights sense, whether it was in March or it's happening still now. You've got to take stock, though, of what you're about. You exist for a reason, or else you wouldn't have been created by whomever the founders of the organization were. And the reality is, those individuals and the people that have supported you believe that you're important and that your services are intended to hopefully be sustainable. So it's a chance in this time to sort of take stock and assess, what are our personal goals? We heard earlier, some of you might have been in a strategic planning place and went, oh, do we still do that? Should we? What do we not? So this is an important time to take stock and sit back and say, let's assess. I need to have some space and time to be clear-headed and work with my team and my colleagues and my board around, where are we really good? Where are we challenged? And make time for that planning. We know no matter when it is, that especially in fundraising, it's the 80-20. Some people would even say it's the 90-10. 80% of the time, spend it planning, 20% execution. So take the time to meet or talk on the phone with your people. That could be your colleagues, your board, your key stakeholders and partners. Set some near-term emergency goals and try to prioritize what are the actions it's going to take for us to do them within each of those. This one is paramount, like bold, underline. The reason why, you even all said it when I asked you, what moves you? There's some personal connection there. There's a sense of trust. Building trust and continuing to build trust is paramount. We all know that in fundraising, it's about relationships. Doors are opened because of relationships. And doors can be further opened because of trusted relationships. So you want to know that you can come out of this time, because we're not going to be in it forever. I know it feels like forever already, and we know that we're hearing reports of quote unquote pre-COVID normalcy may not happen till 2022, but who really knows? The reality is we need each other. We as a human race are designed to need and be in relationship with each other. Think about it. Being isolated doesn't help anyone, emotionally, all of the above. And life, we have observed through these last 6 months, has gone on in some form or fashion. So you want to be one of the first organizations that your stakeholders think of as we lift our heads and come out of this time. The only way to do that is to stay connected. So for your major donors, think about maybe assigning or enlisting a member of your board to be in charge of personally connecting, checking in on them, stewarding them. Someone they already know and trust. It might be you as the executive director, artistic director, program manager. Have regular points of contact that, are relevant and meaningful. Don't think that you are the only one struggling. Your donors and your stakeholders are going through stuff just as well. So listening is critical in this time. But similarly, we've got to inform and share, what are we doing? How are we stepping up and stepping in and leaning in this time of great challenge? Believe me, people want to know, how is this affecting the organization? How is it affecting the staff, the artists, everybody that's involved in our mission? We've talked a little bit about this, which is connection. How do we do it creatively? We've talked about how the traditional way of doing things has been put on hold, or even as we try to navigate it in a virtual space, it's kind of like a little mind-boggling, perhaps. So the one thing, though, that we have to remember is that storytelling can and must continue. You all have stories that your donors and your stakeholders would love to know. It's about taking the time to reach out and say, I know this matters to you. I know we matter to you. You've been a critical piece of our story for the last 10 years, 1 year, 7 years. take time to be able to pitch in and share with them, what is it that you're doing? And how have they been part of it? And how can they be part of it further? So let's look at some creative ways. One of our clients is meeting with people outside. They're a golf entity. They can actually do it safely with social distancing. And they have had a really high demand for their services. So think about the creative ways. You might have a patron or a stakeholder who has a home and would be willing to open it up safely. Again, space, outdoors, maybe in their nice, lovely backyard. And think about things like what could be some unique delivery methods. We're seeing a very high-end, curated sort of event boxes that are coming into people's homes and being delivered with some of these virtual events that are really making people very, very excited about the whole opportunity. So be creative, take some time to think about what that could look like. And of course, you got to keep the drum beat going. This is where the action planning has to come in with some more tactical things. So remember that in the fundraising process overall, actually making that ask, that language of asking, Fayruz did not put that up front. It began with check in, share personally, right? So remember that asking for and receiving the gift is just one little step, important one, in the bigger picture. So stewardship has to be prioritized of your past, current donors and stakeholders, as well as how do we meaningfully cultivate the new relationships where it doesn't come across like we're just tone deaf, because that can happen too. So remember that you've got to keep it going. That's our job. That's what our mission deserves of these amazing causes and organizations that we're tied to and connected with. So this is the opportunity then to take all of this and say, what's the 30-day plan? What's the 60-day plan? And the 90-day plan, all of which have to be adaptable. If there's one thing this time is all about, I learned that in my most recent breast cancer and cancer journey, be flexible. I'd go into a treatment thinking, it's not going to hurt at all in that port. I've iced it. I've numbed it. Sometimes it hurt worse than ever. Okay, so I need to be flexible and adaptable. But the bottom line is, I hope you all hear me really well on this. People need you. People who've already especially invested in you, they're signaling, I think you're important. So please remember that people need you and they want to hear from you. They may not want to hear from you in an email blast or even just an email. They may want you to call them. But the only way to figure all this out is to be in relationship with them, to go out and contact them and see what they say. Try different channels and different methods. Connect with people who know them. And last but not least, important to recognize the goodness and be in a state of gratitude. This positive mindset cannot be underscored. This is where I have to go back to remembering that I got to put on my oxygen mask first before I can help everybody else. So you have to make time for you. You have to find the time for meditation, for contemplation, for exercise, music, whatever it is that makes you happy. Because none of us can do a good job in anything that we do, no matter what our craft is, if we are down in the dumps. We're not going to be able to tell the story meaningfully. No way we can work on a 90-day plan, right? So feel what you feel. Nothing wrong with that. I live it every day in my survivorship with lingering and ongoing nerve pain from my many surgeries and the hardships of those experiences. But take time to celebrate the little wins and the joy, and know that there is goodness and beauty all around you. And you're creating that through these organizations that you serve that are noble. Noble, for sure noble. I don't know how often anybody says that to you, but that's what you're lifting, is a noble and worthy cause that matters and that people do care about. So remember that gratitude is a fundamental piece of fundraising and of stewardship, appreciating these people, showing them how their work or their giving and their investment and their volunteerism is making a difference. That's only growing in this time, right? We are holding on to our donors and our stakeholders in a way maybe like never before. We should be. And hopefully we don't take them for granted in the future. So the actions here could be, we're about to step into fall. Those of us here in Texas, I don't know if it's going to be not until November, but seasons are changing. I know many of you are not here in Texas, but take time to celebrate the beauty in these moments. Let it sink in and try to express gratitude daily, every day. If you can make it your mantra that going forward, you will write one handwritten note to someone each day. Even 3 in a week is good. Just practice that and see what may come of it. So with that, I want to pause for a moment. I know that some of you, as I said earlier, or hopefully all of you received the fundraising workbook. And I'm just curious, how many of you have used it? How many of you have taken time to scribble in there and actually make some planning, take stock, give yourself that moment of pause, you and your colleagues. Anyone? It's the afternoon slump, I understand. Okay.
It's a little bit like being Ferris Bueller's teacher. I'm going to totally date myself. Anyone? Bueller?
Ferris Bueller. I used to be called Ferris because my name.
Oh, right.
It's a hot mess, Kelly. Well, this is the fillable PDF workbook. And if you haven't used it, I just want to walk through it with you, where literally at the very first page after the cover page, it says, pause and breathe. And it really is about you. It begins with you. What are your concerns? What are your deepest hopes? What are personal affirmations for you that you can write down and reflect on? What are you doing for yourself? As I said earlier, are you taking moments to just center yourself? And I say this to myself too. I'm not just saying it to you, but the moment for pause and taking a breath is very important on a personal and a professional level. So consider this first page in the 3 sort of tranches of this workbook to be yours. Nobody else has to see this. This is just for you. Take stock comes next. Now we go into, hey, well, let me think now about my organization and my role in the organization. What are the strengths of my funding strategy right now? What's going on for me? But on the flip side, what are we really struggling with? How is this going to change our strategic plan as we move forward? All of that we're dealing with right now. Is it going to make us go this way or that way? How is this affecting who we serve? And what would be some stories we can share around that with our community of donors and stakeholders? What would be the people that we want to make sure are a part of this in our team? That means our board as well as our professional team. And then lastly, how do we make a plan? What is our process going to be for staying in touch with our community? And you can look at this week by week and say, this week we're prioritizing doing this, and here's who's going to be involved, right? And again, this can be adapted, this can change. That's one of the reasons why this was made into a fillable PDF. So as we wrap up, I want to just take a moment to say, if you are on this call and you're a fundraiser, you're a nonprofit executive, you're a board member, you're a philanthropist, I want you to think of yourself as a change agent for love and transformation, because that's what you're doing. Remember that. That's, again, significant and very noble and very important. And a lot of people rely on you in this role. So your work is not transactional. It should not be viewed as, oh, that necessary evil. This is hard, important work. So Audrey Azoulay is the Director General of UNESCO, and I absolutely love this quote from her. She said, "Just as man needs oxygen to survive, he needs art and poetry." This time, this crisis reminds us, as emphasized by Aimé Césaire, how much art and culture are vital needs for humanity, how much they are the ferment of our unity and our resilience. By participating in this strong impetus for culture, let us all prove that in this period of social distancing, art brings us closer together more than ever before. And that is that. So it allows us a little bit of time.
Sorry, thank you so much. I'm just so excited. This is really amazing. The step-by-step, the opportunity to hear folks' stories and really learn from the case studies, the workbook. I mean, I know it feels overwhelming. And again, the vulnerability that you expressed in sharing your personal story. You know, I admired you and thought you were completely kick-ass before, and now I think it even more so. And so I'm so glad that you're part of the Engage family, the Mid-America family, with the work that you're doing with us. I did want to go back to that question that was in the chat. And it says, if your group doesn't have a regular donor base, how does a group go about building one from scratch, especially if the traditional donor audience is elderly and literally dying off? Changes in values make it more difficult to determine how to position yourself to identify them. We have relied in on ad hoc small donations, $5 to $10 at our individual speaker events. That's a big one, because I you know, with the organizations that work with our program, they are watching their base literally die.
Yeah.
You know, it's hard. Or their priority shift, right? Because these are the folks that now find themselves supporting their families because people are without jobs. So your regular donors and patrons who normally had no problem writing a check, like, yeah, well, I'm, you know, covering my son's rent or helping my grandkids with so-and-so.
It's really, really hard. I think there's a couple thoughts that come to mind, and I invite, you've got this incredible brain trust on this call here who may have ideas too. But one is, this is where it comes back to bite us when we've not thought about this from the outset, let's say, right? When times are good and we're not thinking, hey, what if, for example, if we have a board, we are engaging in conversations with that board, especially if they are retirees and older, about planned giving. Or about the fact that if our expectation is that they all make an annual board leadership gift, 10 or 25% of that goes into this, what do you call, reserve for the future to help us in a rainy day. When I worked for the ballet, that was part of the deal with our 75 board members. Every single donor, every board member's annual board leadership gift, we called it the BPLG, Board Personal Leadership Gift, whether it was $2,500, $1,000, $5,000 and up, and they varied, 10% went into the endowment. When I started,
a great strategy.
It was phenomenal. And it was like, is that really going to do much? Well, each year it gave us a nice 5-figure sum that went into the endowment, aside from any other planned giving, dialogue, or conversation. When I began there, the endowment was not yet $1 million. I think present day, it sits at maybe 8 or 10.
Wow. So it works.
So it is. It's the long haul, right? It's that, like what we think about for our own retirement. One thought, that's just one thought. The other is, it really is, again, go back to even now, and I'm not sure, I think it was Lynn, right, that asked the question. I wonder about what your current board looks like. Are they a board that has the capacity to help seed a planned giving initiative, or to help do some relationship mapping? I was on a board call of a board that I chair just before we'd had this, and we are focusing on the International Day of the Girl that's coming up on October 11th. And there were these lightning moments of people who thought, I can't think of anybody that I want to reach out to. And then like 5 names bubbled up just because we were laser focused on thinking, what relationships do I have? One woman, she was late to the board meeting because a well-known landscape architect was coming to her home. She had like 6 months to get this appointment with her. And she kept saying to her, I really need to get to my board meeting. The woman said, what's your board meeting? She said, it's for this organization called Connect Her. And we're doing something with International Day of the Girl, and I really need to go. And this woman said, you should really come by my office because we have a whole office full of women. I bet we'd all love to hear about that.
Wow.
She would have never put her on her radar as a potential someone to go to and engage in a dialogue with about a sponsorship.
Right.
Fortunately, our board is the people that want to run the museum and do this. And I think our board members are part of the problem. Now, we have a few that will give a few $100 or maybe $2,500 for specific projects, but that's all for specific projects. And so I think as a member of the board is part of the problem. And we've never thought about having to have a sustained donorship because you had all these people in the community, the lifelong families, and they've always given, and our society membership dollars are what we live off of, except for maybe occasional large gifts. So, and they're all project oriented, not, I'm just thinking maybe you start over and say, let's define who we think our donor base should be. We've done individual asks for, again, restoring a building, but not sustaining the society, I think. And so I think that's part of the problem, but there's a lot of good stuff here.
Yeah, well, I wonder too if there's an opportunity to connect. Is there a college or university in your community?
Yeah, and we are using them. And in fact, we have a lawyer on the board and he talked about the planned giving. It's like, okay, are you going to write this brochure? Are you going to write the brochure? Are we going to do the brochure? And so there's some things that I've learned, some stuff here that'll be good. And is there any way we can get are you going to post the recording of this session?
Yes, the recording will be available. Absolutely.
Okay, I think I want the other people on the board to hear this.
Yeah.
Awesome. And there might be an opportunity to actually think about a workshop in the future that is about planned giving.
Yeah, for sure.
How to just simple, like not even the in-depth, wow, you got to have the fancy website with all of the formula, not even talking about
brochure, how you set it up, how you explain it to other people.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I think a step-by-step guide, because I think that is often the challenge with exercises like that. You feel so overwhelmed by the thought of it and you're not quite sure how to begin, and you certainly don't want to begin incorrectly.
No.
And so then you don't do anything, right? I mean, and so maybe just sort of hearing anything that sort of confirms what you were thinking about what to do is actually helpful than not doing anything at all. Someone put in the chat that, they are so glad they attended the workshop because they would have even filled out the workbook differently.
Oh, wow. Good.
Because now they hear it differently. And that's my point around planned giving, right? You can read about it as much as you want to, but to actually not just hear from someone, be able to ask questions and interact, it can actually shift how you understand what you thought you were convinced you already knew.
Yeah.
So, yes, Fayruz, let's talk about that. I did get a question privately, so I'm going to leave the name off, but the question was, what do you advise regarding engaging new donors when events aren't taking place? So how do you cultivate if you're not in the same room or you can't get in the same room?
So it's about how to find the new people, basically?
Yeah, finding them and keeping them active. So maybe you found me, right? You called me, you asked me how I was doing, and I was like, this Fayruz is a boss. I'll be on her. Yes, I will donate to her. Now what? I
actually think, first of all, thank you. I'm going to take you up on that. I'm going to have a conversation with you after. But I really believe this time we're in is not about the view of we're going to get all these people that we don't know. Yes, but you're going to get them engaged. Why? Because of relationships you have. So I believe there's an opportunity to do what I call relationship mapping. You heard me say that just a bit ago. it's basically, it's an exercise that I love to do where it's like, here's Fayruz at the center of the sheet, right? And then, like I was telling you about my fellow board member colleague who didn't realize that her landscape architect could be a person. She's an MD. It's like a flower. You see this?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Here is my professional connections. Here is my civic connections. Here are my neighbors. Here are the people that my daughter, the kids, the parents of the school at school my daughter goes to, right? Other parents I know, maybe just might not know them very deeply, but I have connection to them.
Mm-hmm.
And as I think about how I know each people in each of these buckets, I could have the opportunity to bring what I love and what I'm doing and I'm finding inspiration and joy from to them. Let me tell you a story, an example of this. My husband's a professional soccer coach. He serves on a board that is all about leveling the playing field for youth on the east side of town who do not have the opportunity to have top-notch coaching. He is the guy who makes friends with the person in line at the convenience store. That's my husband. The gentleman who runs a little dry cleaning business in our neighborhood, older gentleman, he chats with Mal all the time. Chat. One day he's like, how you doing? What's the latest? Mal said, oh, I'm going to be doing a free soccer clinic for Soccer Assist. It's a board I'm on, blah, blah, blah. He says, oh, you all need any help with that? You doing any fundraising? Malik says, well, as a matter of fact, we are. Would you be willing to consider doing something? He goes, I'm bringing a check by next week.
Wow.
So,
wow. Just like that.
Yes. An opportunity with whatever committees you've had, whatever volunteers you've had. And really it starts with your board to do, let's call it the flower exercise. Relationship mapping. Think about people that they know in their networks who you don't know. They may not be interested in dance, but do you know if you don't talk about it? You don't. So out of the flower and the 1, 2, 3, 7 or 8 circles, if I find 3 or 5 and I'm on a board of 10 and each of us can do that, that's bringing new people. So I think that the big wide net kind of approach is not what we go for here. Because I also don't want any of these people that I bring in to do a one-time gift and be like, oh, I never heard from them again. I don't even know if they cashed my check, which by the way happened, and I hear about it. We don't want that. We want the lifelong relationship.
Right. This is all the long game, so to speak. Not the long con, but the long game.
Exactly.
Well, we have just a few more minutes. Does anyone else have any questions? I realize it may require you to show us your face because that way then your little box will be lit up and then we can see you. No?
Sounds like they all might need a bio break and a stretch break.
And a snack because we're all right now all glorified kindergartners. We're all back in kiddie. So lots of thank yous. Again, absolutely. Let's definitely continue our conversation, Fayruz, around plan giving and some of the other elements. This was amazing. Thank you so much. Everyone, please check your email. You'll receive a brief survey from us, and we hope that you will continue to participate in our public workshops. You'll also receive information about upcoming workshops. And again, this was amazing. Thank you so much, Fayruz.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Take care, everyone.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.